Hello there, how are you doing? Hope that all is well. Now, my last video I said I wasn't going to speak about AI for a little while at least, namely because I felt like I'd done it to death. However, all of the tech news, it seems, is just AI focused, so I feel like I'll have to do that in the not too distant future again, depending on what happens. Hopefully we won't all be destroyed by a rampaging AI, who knows. What I want to talk about today is something that's a bit sensitive here in Hong Kong where I live, but very relevant at the moment. And that is the talk of internet censorship, and also I want to talk a little bit about TikTok and what's happening over in the West. Generally, how technology is being pushed towards censorship, and also how it's very difficult to actually make censorship take place. But I want to talk about what's happening in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong, we are a bit south of China. I mean, Hong Kong is part of China, but we have a separate legal system and very much a separate internet. I've probably spoken about this before. The internet in China is heavily controlled, heavily monitored, heavily censored. You don't have access to a lot of the apps that we take for granted, really, in the West. Things like Google, things like YouTube, all of those are not accessible in China unless you sort of circumvent the security measures they have in place. Typically by using a VPN, but the VPN technology is of questionable legality at best. You can get into trouble certainly for selling one. Whether you can for using one, I don't know. But yeah, you probably can, but let's not go too far on that. And one of the biggest concerns we've had in Hong Kong for a long time is whether we will eventually get the internet that China has. Will we suddenly find that access to a lot of Western services, a lot of access to a lot of Western news sites, Western news media, Western social media rather, all suddenly gets cut off, and we're basically stuck with using the services that China has, which often don't have an English equivalent, so I would probably be in trouble or not able to use anything. But also don't give you the same sort of information that you would get on the Western services. It's kind of been one of the sort of important things about Hong Kong being a gateway to China, in that we have access to most of the Chinese services, and then most of, if not all, there's one I'm going to talk about in a moment, of the Western favoured services as well. Now, something happened. We've had various attempts, various concerns are that this is going to go away, that there will be some censorship. We have the commemoration of the June 4th, I better call it an incident, Tiananmen Square incident, which happened in 1989, which was commemorated in Hong Kong for years and years and years. It stopped during the time of the protests in 2019, and it's not really taken place since. The people who organised that vigil have since been awaiting trial for quite some time for essentially, I think it's sedition that they've been charged with, which is an old colonial, old British offence which has been brought back. So there's concern that censorship is slowly creeping in. And one of the biggest concerns often is not about the censorship itself, not that something's no longer accessible or can be talked about or whatever, but rather that it will force all of the internet giants to pull out. So a good example is when we had the doxing law brought in Hong Kong, which essentially makes doxing a criminal offence, which fair enough, quite frankly, as long as it's properly enforced. There was a real concern that a lot of internet giants, particularly people like Google and YouTube, or essentially the same thing really, or even Facebook, would pull out because they were worried that their staff would be arrested for not complying with requests to remove doxing material. Now, that didn't happen, but now we have another issue. So last week, when you watch it, if you're watching this when it comes out, it will be last week, the government had an injunction to try and prevent and I'll have to bring it up on my phone to actually give you the actual wording, to ban the broadcasting, performing, printing, publishing, selling, offering for sale, distributing, disseminating, displaying or reproducing in any way a song called Glory to Hong Kong. Now, you might not know about this if you're not based here in Hong Kong, but when we had the protests in 2019 against the extradition bill, which Carrie Lam tried to introduce, there was a song that got considerable fame. It came at sort of the anthem of the protests, called Glory to Hong Kong. It was like an unofficial anthem, if you like, which the anthem, of course, in Hong Kong is March of the Volunteers, the Chinese national anthem. And it gained favour, and people would sing it at protests and people would play it. Now, post-national security law, it's questionable whether you should be able to play it at all in public. It's seen as something that you shouldn't be doing. People get arrested for doing it. Buskers have been arrested for playing it, for example. And certainly, if you criticise the Chinese national anthem or you desecrate the Chinese national flag, that is an offence here in Hong Kong, as it is in many jurisdictions. I mean, their national flag, not China's. That's not one that is offence everywhere. Though I think the law to say it is enforceable everywhere. Now, Glory to Hong Kong was sort of faded out of the limelight after protests and during COVID, to a certain degree anyway, unless you were part of the protest movement. But then there were a number of sporting blunders where at major sporting events when Hong Kong was playing, rather than playing the Chinese national anthem, March of the Volunteers, by accident, Glory to Hong Kong was played, and this was seemingly because it was top of the Google search for a while if you search for Hong Kong national anthem. So, honest mistake, but what normally happened was there was uproar here in Hong Kong. Various politicians got very upset, they called for inquiries, they threatened to penalise the sporting bodies involved, and actually that raised more awareness for the fact that they played the wrong anthem than the actual fact that the anthem had been played, but there we go. So now we're in a position where the government is trying to get an injunction to essentially ban the song. Now, if you don't know what an injunction is, it's where you go to court to get an order that you're not allowed to do something, or that you have to do something sometimes, but normally that you're not allowed to do something. And that is what I said earlier, you're essentially not allowed to republish, reproduce, sell, distribute the song Glory to Hong Kong. And it hasn't gone through, it's been adjourned, there's going to be another hearing in about a month's time. But the issue is, it's the first time that they've actually gone so far as to try and get an injunction, rather than just drafting a law, which would probably be more effective, I'm sure they'll do that in the long term, to actually ban something, to actually essentially censor something completely. They're not just relying on they can use the national security laws to say that it would be a seditious song, which I think would probably work. They're not doing the legislation route yet. They're instead just trying to ban it. So if you were to, say, sell a copy of the song or reproduce it or sing it, you would essentially face contempt of court proceedings, because if you breach an injunction, it's contempt of court, which can lead to you having financial penalty or more likely imprisonment. So it's pretty severe penalty for this. And the injunction, the reason it's been adjourned is it's not clear who it covers, does it apply to the whole world? And one of the issues that's come out of that is, well, Google have said we're not going to remove it from the internet. It's not going to go from search engines. Why would they? It kind of goes against their ethos. If they do that, the question then is, will we suddenly find that Google and similar services that allow access to Glory to Hong Kong, they get removed? We don't have access to them at all here, or we end up with the Chinese internet that I talked about before. And it's a real concern. I don't know how it will play out. I find the concept of an injunction to ban a song not the right way to necessarily do it. I think somebody in the Department of Justice had a good idea and it wasn't necessarily a good idea. I feel that they probably could just do it with legislation if that's what they want to do. But it's had the result, as censorship always does, of putting Glory to Hong Kong in the top 10, literally, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth and 10th positions of the Hong Kong iTunes chart. Because if you try and ban something, you draw more attention to it. It's the Streisand effect. If you basically say, Barbara Streisand tried to ban something, and I can't remember what it was, but the effect of it was that it became more popular and more people watched it. Hence the Streisand effect. If you try and stop something, ban something, people are more interested to watch it and know what it is. So we'll see what happens. If it does go through, I'll be very upset if that brings away sort of the downfall of free internet here in Hong Kong. But also, I wonder if I can use it then to get my own injunction to ban the Venga Boys, which would also, I think, be something that would be in the public good, as well as actually meaning we never have to listen to something that but there we are. This is all happening now. I don't know how it will play out. I assume an injunction will eventually go through in a more tempered form. It might only be restricted in Hong Kong and China. Fine, we'll just have to see, and I'll let you know what happens. But it made me think of something else. So I've already mentioned that Chinese internet is very different to that in the West and in Hong Kong. But there's lots of moves, and moves have been going on since Trump was president of the United States, to ban TikTok. Now, if you're familiar with TikTok, I'm sure you are if you're watching this in the West. You may or may not be if you're watching this somewhere else. We will see. TikTok is an app, a platform essentially created by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, which a massive share of it is held by US parties in this, but it's majority owned by China. And ostensibly, let's be honest, controlled by China. That allows short form videos, and it's huge. If you've never heard of it, I'd be surprised. It's absolutely huge all over the West. It's not available in China. In China, they have their own version called Douyin, I'm going to pronounce that terribly, I apologize, which is a very different platform, because TikTok videos, it's quite profitable these days, and I kind of wish I thought about it when I was younger, but there was no TikTok then, to become a TikTok star. You do some short form videos, you might be able to become an influencer, you get lots of views, you can get sponsorship, you can become a millionaire living in Barbados rather than someone sitting in a room surrounded by books that are about to fall on him, which is great. But a lot of the content on there is quite questionable. There's concerns that TikTok can be used to spread disinformation. Let's be honest, any social media platform, actually any platform, anything where anyone can contribute to it, can be used to spread disinformation. Emails are used to spread disinformation. There's concern over that. But there's also concern that it's a platform created by the Chinese government essentially to bring down Western society, which seems a little bit ridiculous. But there is, I guess, we have a bit of a almost Cold War going on at the moment between America and China, so that's kind of fine. But it made me wonder, why isn't it available in China? Why do they have Douyin? And Douyin is a very different platform in that it's a lot of focused on shopping and beauty products, although there's a lot of that, to be fair, on TikTok as well. There's also quite a lot of patriotic videos on there. And what is really weird for me is that TikTok and Douyin actually are not available in Hong Kong. I mean, Douyin is for a mainland Chinese audience, and in fact, there was a period a few years ago where if you had a Western person broadcasting a video, it would be intercepted and stopped. I don't know if that's still going. I assume that isn't. I hope it isn't. But why is it we don't get it here? And that kind of makes me wonder, well, maybe there is some relevance to, maybe it should be censored, maybe it's collecting data. I know now there's moves to remove TikTok from any official phones, so if you're working for government in certain jurisdictions, you're not allowed to have it on your phone. But your kids are going to have it anyway. I mean, you're not going to be able to stop kids using it. So we'll see. I will say that any platform that's based in China or originates in China or answers to the Chinese government is obliged to share its information with the Chinese government. The various data security laws already prescribe that, and I'm pretty sure that even without those, the Chinese authorities would be able to get data anyway. I have experienced clients being raided, their offices in China raided, to collect various forms of information. So that's a given. And that was a concern that came up when Huawei was still trying to sell its wares in the West, which seems to have gone horribly wrong for Huawei now, whether rightly or wrongly, there we go. But Huawei would have to share whatever information it gets with the Chinese government. But it makes me think again whether a censorship actually works. So all this talk about banning TikTok, whether you're paranoid, tinfoil hat, assuming that something's going to be sinister is going on, it's being used to bring down society, which I'm pretty sure it's not able to do on its own. But you don't think that you can actually ban now. Suppose that you said it's no longer available. The amount of users who could either use a VPN or have already downloaded it and won't delete it from their phones and still have access to it, or find other means to actually access it underground, it won't go away. Censoring anything, frankly, makes it more popular. When I was a kid, I wanted to see so many video nasties. This was a thing that happened in the 80s where they tried to ban various films saying they were a terrible influence on society. And I remember going to great lengths to watch the first Evil Dead film because it was essentially a video nasty in the UK. Like getting a copy from someone's friend that they actually had it. We went to the house to watch it. And it was a bit scary, but it wasn't really as bad as that thing, and it didn't bring down society. So I don't think that censorship works. I mean, it's there for a reason. There are certain things that you don't want people to have access to, but frankly, they'll still be able to get access to them. Going back to the Chinese internet thing, how many Chinese politicians or Chinese trolls post on Twitter, which is apparently not accessible in China? You're always going to be able to get around it. So I think it's all a bit futile. And that just brings me back to the concern that if you actually go about censoring things, if we get to a point where Hong Kong suddenly loses access to Western services, one, with no Google Maps, I'll be lost 90% of the time in Hong Kong, even to this day. But two, it will mean that a lot of investment pushes out of here and everyone moves over to Singapore, which would be a great shame because Hong Kong is actually a fabulous place, even though it's a little bit too hot here at the moment, but still not as hot as it is in Singapore. But that was my thoughts. I'd be interested what you think. Is censorship good or bad? How long do we have in terms of having access to all services, not just in Hong Kong, but in other jurisdictions too? I'm pretty sure that as people look at different models of government, that you will find different approaches to what free speech should be and what people can include. But interested in what you think. I'm going to be away for a little while, so I'm doing a trip, so I won't be in Hong Kong for a while. But I'll be back soon with another video, which ostensibly will probably end up being on AI if something dramatic happens, but maybe it won't. But if you are using TikTok or your kids are using TikTok, let me know what you think. Do you think it's a platform that should be banned, should be controlled, should be censored? And if you think it should, then why shouldn't we be censoring Facebook? Why shouldn't we be censoring Twitter? Why should we be censoring anything else? Is it just because it's ostensibly owned by a different organisation that could use it to spread disinformation? When frankly, Facebook was used quite successfully to spread disinformation in a number of elections. Who knows? Maybe the real problem is people just have to be careful about what they're doing, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it for the moment from me. Have a good one, and I'll be back very, very soon. Take care.